My name is Russ Siegenberg. I'm an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm a Jewish convert of 43 years and hold a doctorate in psychology. I'm not a professional anthropologist or geneticist, but have given considerable study and thought to this topic. I believe the ideas I am sharing will prove interesting and worthy of others' attention. I should say I'm not an official representative of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and all views expressed are my personal opinions. First, I'd like to clearly state my objectives. I wish to recognize the great efforts put forth by researchers of the first Americans. There is an ample body of knowledge already established that provides a good framework by which to begin. My own intent is to be concise, honest, and as free from bias as is possible in my presentation. I will cite references from scientific works to support my conclusions. I will also reference the Book of Mormon to consider what it has to say about geography, culture, and significant historical events. The Book of Mormon is a very controversial book. To Latter-day Saints, it's the keystone of our religion and a glorious revelation of truth. Others see it as the work of a clever con man and may find its message personally threatening to their views. In the Book of Mormon story, the Jaredites came to the Americas from the Middle East roughly around 2000 BC, but were eventually destroyed. The Nephite and Lamanite people came from the land of Israel around 500 BC. They were visited by Jesus Christ and are said to be the ancestors of some portion of the American Indian people. For many years, people said there was no genetic or archaeological evidence for the existence of the Book of Mormon people. However, evidence gathered over the past 20 years or so suggests otherwise. And it's very interesting to consider where the Nephites lived in Americas. People have also, of course, been interested in the first Americans. Lithic technology has been closely examined by many researchers. Lithic technology is the study of stone tools. It was thought that Clovis point weapons in America were so similar to those produced by Paleo-Europeans that those ancient Europeans must have somehow crossed the Atlantic. This is called the Solutrean hypothesis. Mayan pyramids and glyphs seemed Egyptian-like, and many people thought this suggested a Middle Eastern connection with the New World. A number of artifacts have been discovered with Hebrew letters or references to Israel. One of these is the Bat Creek stone found in an ancient burial mound in Tennessee with a Hebrew inscription which has been translated as "For the Judeans." The Mystery Mountain stone in Los Lunas, New Mexico has Paleo-Hebrew script and provides an abridged version of the Ten Commandments. There are also the Newark, Ohio Holy Stones, one of which has a Hebrew version of the Ten Commandments as well. The Adena and Hopewell Indian cultures in the American Midwest have captured the imagination of many. The burial mounds, fortifications, large cities, copper weapons and armor, and symbolic earthen designs seem very different than the cultures of the Indians of the 18th and 19th century. The fortifications in particular seem similar to those described in the battle passages from Alma and the Book of Mormon. Also, the timelines for the Adena, 3000 BC to 300 BC, and the Hopewell, 500 BC to 500 AD, fit somewhat with the time periods for the Jaredites and the Nephites. Many Latter-day Saints have felt that these certainly must be the people of the Book of Mormon. Nonetheless, all the apparent connections mentioned thus far may not be what they seem to be. We must always be very careful in our conclusions about the past. Clovis-style spear points have not only been found in the eastern part of America and in Europe, but also on the west coast of America and in Siberia as well. Apparently, Europeans were not the only ones who could create those types of points. The Bat Creek stone, the Los Lunas Decalogue stone, and the Newark Holy Stones all may be fakes. In the case of the Bat Creek stone, found in 1890, John Emmert, the excavator of the Smithsonian Mound Survey Project, apparently forged the writing on the stone to convince his boss, Cyrus Thomas, that it might be from an ancient Cherokee language. Emmert was a troubled individual who once had been fired from the Smithsonian for drinking problems. The stone was found in a mound under a head of a skeleton by Emmert when he was alone. It was not until the 1970s that anyone saw it as Hebrew. However, in 2004, Mainfort and Quas, in an article in American Antiquity magazine, reported that the text of the inscription had appeared as an illustration in a Freemason reference book published in 1870, thus exposing the forgery. The Smithsonian concluded in 2014 that the stone was a fake. Most of the Newark stones were judged to be crudely done fakes, but the Decalogue stone was a more impressive forgery. The Hebrew writing appeared to be ancient in character, and it was encased in a well-carved stone box. However, the Hebrew text reportedly incorporated several errors that came from incorrectly transcribing a 19th century Hebrew version of the Ten Commandments into the archaic-looking alphabet of the Decalogue stone. It was thought that abolitionists were behind the forgeries. They wanted to show that the races were mixed in the USA, and therefore slavery was wrong. This references Ohio Archaeological Council 2019. The Mystery Mountain stone in Los Lunas, New Mexico apparently presents several problems as well. Greek letters of a slightly later date are mixed in with Hebrew forms, and the word sequence is off. Additionally, there are no signs of ancient people having resided nearby as might be expected. Reference is Bad Archaeology article by Keith Fitzpatrick Matthews, 2011. So what is the real truth? It can be hard to tell. In the end, some of these artifacts may turn out to be the real deal. People often tend to find what they're looking for. Our biases can lead us to ignore or explain away evidence or leap to conclusions from sketchy findings. LDS people are quite interested to find things to substantiate evidence for the Book of Mormon, and most scientists seem to be on the other side of that quest. Now, some evidence is more compelling than others. The Mi'kmaq are an Algonquin tribe from eastern Canada. They are unique in that they have had a hieroglyphic writing system. This system is thought to have existed for hundreds of years before Egyptian hieroglyphics were translated in 1822 by Jean-François Champollion using the Rosetta Stone. Pierre Millard, a Roman Catholic priest, used the Mi'kmaq hieroglyphic system to write down prayers for the tribe in 1737. This information is notable because Joseph Smith was scoffed at when he claimed the Book of Mormon was written by Native Americans in a shorthand called Reformed Egyptian. That the Mi'kmaq had a hieroglyphic writing system does not prove anything, of course, but it does establish a possible connecting point. Now, the true acid test these days for determining the origins of people is DNA testing. Both the Mayans and the Hopewell Indians turned out to have DNA that is predominantly connected to Asia and Siberia, and not the Middle East. However, the Nephite civilization may certainly have influenced their neighbors' cultures. Much scientific progress has been made in the field of genetics. Examining mitochondrial and nuclear DNA can help identify ancestral groups and provide a way to substantiate theories on migration patterns. I want to share some thoughts on DNA and provide a widely accepted way to consider the main question we're concerned about: where are the Nephite lands located? DNA, of course, is the blueprint for development that we carry in our genes. DNA replication is the process by which DNA makes a copy of itself during cell division. When DNA is replicated, mutations occasionally occur, and these mistakes will be passed on to descendants. Each population starts with a set of mutations inherited from its ancestral population, and over many generations, new mutations are added on. Because the older mutations remain in the chain, each group has distinctive DNA. Since these genetic markers differentiate one group from another, they can be used to help reconstruct the migrations of populations around the world. Around the early 1990s, genetic researchers found mitochondrial DNA haplogroup types A, B, C, and D in the genes of native North Americans. Found or earlier types of these markers existed in Asia and Siberia, and not in Europe or the Middle East. It was assumed that the earliest ancestors of the American Indians crossed from Asia over the Bering Land Bridge that existed when seas were lowered during the glacial period. Coastal Siberian DNA is closely related to American Eskimo and Nadine mitochondrial DNA. The Nadine are a native group that lives mainly in far northern Canada. These related populations form a type of genetic trail leading from Asia into the Americas. These striking results led many to happily state that the Book of Mormon claims of the American Indians having roots in Israel were clearly false. The references for this are Foster, Harding, Tarani, and Bendel, American Journal of Human Genetics, 1996, and Tarani, Sukernick, and Schurer, American Journal of Human Genetics, 1993. Lisa Mills, in her doctoral dissertation from Ohio State University in 2003, examined some of the specimens from the Hopewell earthworks near Chillicothe, Ohio. They estimated that these individuals had lived around 250 A.D., making them part of the Hopewell culture. They found 34 specimens they could use and extracted DNA from teeth. All the specimens had A, B, C, or D mtDNA, and none had X. The distribution was 41% A, 9% B, the smallest percentage, and the rest were either C or D. And then Balnick and Smith published an article in American Antiquity in 2007. They had examined specimens from the Pete Clunk Mounds in Campsville, Illinois. They estimated that these individuals had lived around 300 A.D., making them also part of the Hopewell culture. They found 39 specimens they could use and extracted DNA from ribs and other bones. And all the specimens had A, B, C, or D mtDNA except one who had X. The distribution was 9 of A, 5 of B, 19 of C, 5 of D, and 1 of X. So these results make it reasonably clear that the Hopewell were from native groups who migrated from Asia. And I think it's very outstanding that we can use DNA to clarify some of these arguments that go on for years and years. And it really gives us a way to determine what's correct. Then in 1998, there was the big news. A new haplogroup, X2A, was found in certain tribes of American Indians. Now these Indians are living present descendants. The X2A haplogroup occurs in about 25% in the Ojibwa, 15% in the Sioux Indians, 7% in the Navajo, and 5% in the Yakima Indians. Those with X2A are Northern Amerindians. References Brown, Hosseini, and Toronto, American Journal of Human Genetics, 1998. However, unlike with haplogroups A, B, C, and D, there's no trace of X in Alaska, far northern Canada, or in northeastern Siberia, the supposed jumping-off point for all American Indian ancestors. Haplogroup X does not occur in South America either. Reference is Keeley, Perigo, and Brow in PLOS One, 2008. PLOS One is an online journal. Variations of the X2 haplogroup do occur in 3% of the Altai people in central Siberia, X2E, and to a smaller degree in the Evenk, east of the Altain, X2 star. The incidence in the Pacific Northwest of Indian people with X2A is about 3%, while in the Midwest and Northeast it's about 14%. Reference is Brown, Hosseini, and Toronto, American Journal of Human Genetics, 1998. Again, clearly the genetic trail for X from Asia is a faint one. So people have questioned that, trying to figure out where this X gene came from. Some have thought that the progenitors of X2A in the Americas must certainly have come from the Altain area of central Siberia, since they have the X haplogroup. However, the Altains have haplogroup type X2E2A. This haplogroup type is newer and more evolved. X2E2A also occurs in England, Germany, Greece, Turkey, Georgia, and in the Middle East. References Masayamo Hay and Hay and Upedia.com Genetics, 2016. Some other researchers, Redler, Kivesald, and Metzbala, published in the American Journal of Human Genetics in 2003, an important article. They said that the Native American haplogroup X mtDNA is derived from X2 by a unique combination of 5 mutations, and the few known Altain and Siberian haplogroup X lineages are not related to the Native American cluster. Durenko, Grzybowski, and Malyarchuk had tested the people in Siberia. American Journal of Human Genetics, 2001. Redler went on and said that the low diversity of haplogroup X among the Altai indicates a more recent arrival of X DNA. She suggests that the Middle East is the most likely geographical source for the spread of subhaplogroup X2 to North America. So she goes out on a limb a little bit on this one. But that was her conclusion. She did also note that the X2A haplogroup would have needed 12,000 years to develop. This time length requirement does conflict with the idea of Nephites landing in America in 500 BC, or even the Jaredites landing in 2000 BC. It should be noted that the formula for determining population age from DNA samples is partially based on estimated ape DNA mutation rates, and so it's theoretical in nature. So, big question, where does haplogroup X in North America come from? Most researchers explain that there must have been a small founder group of haplogroup X in Asia that disappeared over the centuries, with some first making their way to the Americas over the land bridge. This particular hypothesis is quite inventive and not grounded in facts. The jump in logic seems to come from holding on to the idea that sea travel to the Americas by ancient people would not have been possible. So if X did not come from Asia, where did it come from? Haplogroup X is found in approximately 2% of the population of Europe, the Near East, and North America. No presence of DNA ancestral to X2A is found in Europe. North American lineages of X2A and X2G are not derived from the Old World lineages, X2B, X2C, X2D, X2E, and X2F. However, the Druze population in the Galilee region of northern Israel has a high diversity of X haplogroup lineages along with high frequency, 22% overall, 9.3% X1 and 13.1% X2. References Schluss, Behar, Yudkowsky, and that was in PLOS One, 2008. Libyan and Tunisian Jews share the X haplogroup type X2E1A1A as the most frequently found type. 40% of Libyan Jews have X2E1A1A. References Behar, Matspalu, Kivasal, PLOS One, 2008. There is a consensus that the founder groups for haplogroup X originally come from the Middle East. The possibility of successful sea voyages by population groups from the Middle East seems just as plausible as people from phantom X haplogroups in Asia making it to North America over the land bridge. Therefore, DNA studies no longer fully rule out the Book of Mormon migration stories. We'll now switch from science to faith and consider what the Book of Mormon has to say about geography and potential clues to the whereabouts of Nephi lands. Hopefully, in the end, we'll be able to tie faith and science together to some degree. All right, we have a lot of scriptures to go over. They form an important picture for us so we can understand where the land of the Nephites is. So I'm going to start with Ether 7:6. Now the land of Moron, where the king dwelt, was near the land which is called Desolation by the Nephites. This king we're referring to as Kib, the second king of the Jaredites, and he lived, we think, about 1900 BC. Now Mormon 3:5, and it came to pass that I did cause my people that they should gather themselves together at the land Desolation to a city which was in the borders by the narrow pass which led into the land southward. And this would be about 360 AD. And we have a better sense of dates as we get into the later parts of the Book of Mormon, because they kept track of how many years it was after Christ came. Ether 9:3. Omer departed out of the land with his family and traveled many days and came over and passed by the hill of Shem and came over by the place where the Nephites were destroyed. We know this to be Cumorah, and Omer was the son of Shul, who was the fourth king of the Jaredites, so we're guessing about 1750 BC. And then Mormon 4:23. Now I, Mormon, did go to the hill Shem and did take up all the records. Ether 15:11, and it came to pass that the army of Coriantumr did pitch their tents by the hill Ramah, And it was that same hill where my father Mormon did hide up the records unto the Lord, which were sacred. Mormon 6:4. And it came to pass that we did march forth to the land of Cumorah, and we did pitch our tents around about the hill Cumorah, and it was in the land of many waters, rivers, and fountains, and here we had hoped to gain advantage over the Lamanites. You can see how we're skipping between Ether and Mormon, and again there's about 1,500 years or more difference, actually about over 2,000 years difference between the two, but we're coming up with some of the same names. Mormon 6:6. Therefore I made this record out of the plates of Nephi and hid it up in the hill Cumorah, all the records. That was approximately 385 AD. And finally, Omni 1:21. And they gave an account of one Coriantumor, and the slain of his people. And Coriantumor was discovered by the people of Zarahemla, and he dwelt with them for the space of 9 moons. Coriantumor was the last surviving king of the Jaredites, and he crossed paths with the Nephites. All these scriptures tell us that these people stayed largely within the bounds of the same geographical markers. The land of desolation, Shim, Cumorah, Zarahemla, and the narrow neck are all mentioned in both Ether, the story of the Jaredites, and in other parts of the Book of Mormon, although the stories are roughly 1,500 years apart, as noted. Now we're going to look at something interesting here where we kind of see that we're given some ideas about where the people landed when they came to North America. Alma 22:30, and it, meaning bountiful, bordered upon the land which they called desolation, it being so far northward that it came into the land which had been peopled and had been destroyed, of whose bones we have spoken, which was discovered by the people of Zarahemla, it being the place of their first landing. That is the Mulekites about 588 BC. Mulek was the son of King Zedekiah, who fled with a group of people around the time of Jerusalem's destruction by Babylon. Interestingly, in their earliest oral history, the Algonquin Indians say they migrated from the Atlantic coast up the St. Lawrence Seaway. The Algonquin have the largest percentage of X haplogroup types among all North American Indians. Now, I should add that if you go up the St. Lawrence Seaway, it brings you over to Lake Ontario, which is just above Cumorah. Now, Alma 22:28. Now, the more idle part of the Lamanites lived in the wilderness and dwelt in tents. And they were spread through the wilderness on the west in the land of Nephi, yea, and also on the west of the land of Zarahemla, in the borders by the seashore, and on the west in the land of Nephi, in the place of their father's first inheritance, and thus bordering along by the seashore. So Alma 22 takes place in 90 BC. Therefore, according to the record, the Lamanites lived in the same spot for almost 7 years, having arrived about 590 BC. In conclusion, if we believe the Book of Mormon accounts, there was no long migration of thousands of miles for either the Jaredites or the Nephites. We're going to talk about some other clues for the location of Nephite lands. The hill Cumorah is the central piece of this puzzle. We know that both the Jaredites and the Nephites traveled to and had their final battles around this area in northern New York State. Also, Mormon buried the plates here. This information anchors in a starting point by which to locate the Nephite lands. The next piece of the puzzle would be the description of the immediate area where the Nephites lived. Alma 22:32. And now it was only the distance of a day and a half's journey for a Nephite on the line Bountiful and the land Desolation, from the east to the west sea, and thus the land of Nephi and the land of Zarahemla were nearly surrounded by water, there being a small neck of land between the land northward and the land southward. Mormon 3:5. And it came to pass that I did cause my people that they should gather themselves together at the land Desolation, to a city which was in the borders, by the narrow pass which led into the land southward. Ether 10:20. And they, meaning the Jaredites, built a great city by the narrow neck of land, by the place where the sea divides the land. Again, Alma 50:34. And it came to pass that they did not head them until they had come to the borders of the land desolation. And there they did head them by the narrow pass which led by the sea into the land northward, yea, by the sea on the west and on the east. We keep hearing about that passage, don't we? Alma 22:32-33. This gives an important description. And it came to pass that the Nephites had inhabited the land bountiful, even from the east unto the west sea. And thus the Nephites in their wisdom, with their guards and their armies, had hemmed in the Lamanites on the south, that thereby they should have no more possession on the north, that they might not overrun the land northward. Thus the lands of the Nephites and the Lamanites were on a peninsula with seas on the east and west. Seas should mean the ocean or large lakes. The land narrowed to a narrow neck that led to the north. In Alma's time, the journey on the neck took a day and a half. Later, Helaman, in Helaman 4:7, would say it was only a day's journey across the neck. It's possible that the paths were improved. Perhaps Helaman was a faster walker. We're going to estimate one day's journey as being 15 to 25 miles for the distance on the narrow neck. Now, there's also a lot of mention of people traveling north and south, so we're going to look at those scriptures because I think it's important to recognize this as we're trying to understand the geography. Mormon 3:5. And it came to pass that I did cause my people that they should gather themselves together at the land desolation to a city which was in the borders by the narrow pass which led into the land southward. So the Lamanites lived south of the Nephites. Ether 9:31. And it came to pass that their flocks began to flee before the poisonous serpents towards the land southward, which was called by the Nephites Zarahemla. The Jaredites became more wicked and fled south from areas around Mormon. Mormon 1:6. And it came to pass that I, being 11 years old, was carried by my father into the land southward, even to the land of Zarahemla. So we know that Mormon was in the land Antum, not too far, we think, from the hill Shim. And he went with his family southward to Zarahemla. And of course the Jaredites went south from around Moran, where they lived, when pursued by the snakes, and ended up in Zarahemla as well. Ether 9:3. More directions. And the Lord warned Omer in a dream that he should depart out of the land. Wherefore Omer departed out of the land with his family, and traveled many days, and came over and passed by the hill of Shem, and came over by the place where the Nephites were destroyed. So Omer was in Moran, which was near the land of desolation, as noted in Ether 7:6. He traveled past the hill Shem, and ended up in Cumorah, apparently heading north. When Mormon and his family were in the land of Antum, as I noted, they went south to Zarahemla. So the hill Shem seems to be on the way to Cumorah. Ether 14:11 and 26. And it came to pass that in the first year of Lib, Coriantumr came up and unto the land of Moran, and gave battle unto Lib. And it came to pass that Shiz did pursue Coriantumr eastward, even to the borders by the seashore. And there he gave battle unto Shiz for the space of 3 days. So Moran appears to be north or northeast of desolation. Moran's eastern borders were by the sea. Ether 9:35. And it came to pass that when they had humbled themselves sufficiently before the Lord, he did send rain upon the face of the earth, and the people began to revive again, and there began to be fruit in the north countries. So the prophet identifies the area where the Jaredites lived, generally around Moran, as the north countries, the original lands of the Nephites and Lamanites being south. Helaman 3 and 4. And it came to pass in the 46th, year, there was much contention and many dissensions, in the which there was an exceedingly great many who departed out of the land of Zarahemla, and went forth unto the land northward to enter the land. And they did travel to an exceedingly great distance, insomuch they came to large bodies of water and many rivers. So this is important to recognize. So as we start to try to locate the land, we'll notice where there's the most water. So we've gathered together all our clues. I can considered the Great Lakes areas as a possible home for the Nephites, but could not reconcile several problems. The Michigan Peninsula does have seas on the west and the east, Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, but it spreads out in the south and is not surrounded by water. Toledo, Ohio to Gary, Indiana in that area is over 200 miles in distance. Lake Erie is south of Lake Ontario, and so when in the Niagara area, the seas are on the north and south. The area of land where Toronto lies is between Lake Huron and Lake Ontario, but there's no narrow neck in the north, and it's not surrounded by water on the south, even though it has seas on the east and west. Even if that area by Toronto was different in the past and there were lakes in the south, Cumorah would have been to the southeast, which does not seem to fit the scriptures. There's only one large peninsula in the northeast coastal area of the United States, south of the hill Cumorah, that meets all the criteria we're looking for. A narrow neck in the north and surrounded by water with seas on the east and west. So now I want to give you a chance to stop the video and check out Google Maps and see if you'd like to search for it. I'll give you about 5 seconds to do that. So remember, it's in the northeast coastal area of the United States, a narrow neck in the north and surrounded by water with seas on the east and west. So, if you found it, or if you'd like me to show it to you, we're talking about the Delmarva Peninsula. So the Delmarva Peninsula extends southward between the Chesapeake Bay on the west and the Delaware River, Delaware Bay, and Atlantic Ocean on the east. It encompasses parts of the states of Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, hence its name. The peninsula is approximately 180 miles long and up to 70 miles wide. The Delaware-Chesapeake Canal, which cuts the peninsula near its most narrow part, is 14 miles in length, just perfect for our narrow neck. Native paths would not likely be as straight due to the need to avoid physical obstacles such as marshes or lakes, so any paths the natives have might have made the distance a little bit longer. The river Sidon might be the Chester River, a major tributary of the Chesapeake Bay on the Delmarva Peninsula that begins at Millington, Maryland. This river is 43 miles long and its watershed encompasses 368 square miles. Now, regarding the Delmarva Peninsula, it's important to note that there's a great abundance of food sources there. The area has very rich soil and to this day remains an important agricultural area. There are many rivers and bays to fish and hunt in and to gather shellfish in. There would have been deer and other wildlife to hunt in the forests as well. Additionally, the area is an important migratory bird stopover location along the Atlantic coast, offering plenty of waterfowl to hunt. One person writing about Delmarva said it would have been nearly impossible for the native peoples to starve there. The climate's fairly mild. The average high temperature in winter, in January, the coldest month, is 45 degrees, and there are 230 frost-free days per year. The average precipitation is about 42 inches per year. So you can look at the map that I've composed, and I have the names of the states that presently exist, and then I have the Nephite names to designate the areas that they lived in and traveled in. And so you can see we have a Lake Ontario, which to the Nephites was Ripley Ancum, and then Cumorah just below that, and that's where the hill Cumorah still is. And then as you go south, you have the hill Shem and the Moran, and then we get into the land Desolation. And then as you get down towards the narrow neck, you have the land of Bountiful and the capital city of Zarahemla. That's further below that. And then the land of Nephi. So that's my best estimate of where these things could have possibly been. The main thing we know about them, there seems to be a definite north-south axis we can depend on. There's ample evidence of ancient inhabitants in this area. The Sandy Hill Archaeological Site in Maryland on the Delmarva Peninsula has produced a great many artifacts. This cache was found in 1927. It has 178 artifacts, many of which are outstanding examples of the Adena culture and includes tube pipes, gorgets, copper, large bifaces, and a variety of miscellaneous items. Adena sites have additionally been found in Frederica and along the St. Johns River in Delaware. These three major sites all have burial grounds as well. Across the bay and the Chesapeake Bay, the Pig Point dig in Anne Arundel County in Maryland has also yielded an abundance of artifacts. This is on the west side of Chesapeake Bay. Some of the items were unique, such as Ohio Valley flints and pipes and Adena blades as long as 10 inches. So, question, what about DNA in the Indians of the Delmarva Peninsula? Some of the more recent Indian tribes that lived in the Delmarva area were the Assateague, Nantego, Choptank, Piscataway, and Lenape peoples. And Americans lived among them, and so these tribes were there in the 1600s and 1700s and 1800s. And they were all Algonquin-speaking peoples. And we can recall that it's the Algonquin tribes that have the greatest percentages of the important X2A and X2G haplogroup types that have origins in the Middle East. These Indian tribes made treaties with the white men, but those treaties were broken, and most of the Delmarva Native Americans left and assimilated into Algonquin tribes in northern areas. Unfortunately, we do not have any DNA data from the ancient people of the Delmarva Peninsula. If we did, it would be very interesting to see how many X2 haplogroup types showed up. This concludes the presentation. I hope this video was interesting and helpful. The intent was not to prove anything conclusively, but to open up some possibilities. Since the Book of Mormon is a spiritual work, its truthfulness can only be determined by study, faith, and prayer. I myself have received a spiritual witness from God about the Book of Mormon, and I invite all others to read and ponder its wonderful message about Jesus Christ. Thank you.